during that period until 1999. And the advent of our transition to democracy following the 1999 elections seemed to have marked a glorious turn of events for our country. Unfortunately, the only thing we can absolutely celebrate is that we have maintained a determination to stay the course of democratic form of government. And that's because we have practiced democracy in the breach. And so what we call the principle and the practice of democracy have not earned us laurels in all global democratic indicators. We actually, in the Economists of London annual democracy indicator, come in the category of democracies that are called hybrid democracies. We're in the lower bottom of that ranking. And we know that the most important driver of our democratic lapses come from the fact that the fundamental concept of democracy as competition is distorted through the electoral system. So we gather at a time when the lowest level of public trust in any institution is what hangs over INEC, following the unmitigated disaster and the fiasco of the conduct of the 2023 elections. Therefore, reforms that would address the core challenges of independence, credibility, and capacity that have plagued Nigerian elections are the only pathway to rebuilding confidence in the elections umpire. These are the key reforms that I consider critical to strengthening the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and to herald the integrity of our country's electoral processes. Institutions are said to be the bedrock of democracy. The independence, integrity, and the capacity of institutions as organizational systems determine whether the objectives for which they have been set will be achieved. And so I start with financial and operational autonomy. Direct funding from the Consolidated Revenue Fund and transparency of expenditure by INEC should be on the table for electoral reforms. INEC should receive allocations directly without going through the executive branch, ensuring independence from political interferences. The Commission's budget should be protected and released in full and on time to enable proper election planning. In return, INEC which is one of the institutions bedeviled by corruption, should be mandated to adopt the full principles of open budgeting and spending, working with civil society to track every money spent in order to ensure accountability. Number two is we need, for organizational strength, enhanced prosecutorial powers for INEC. INEC currently relies on the police and the Attorney General for prosecution of electoral offenses. The absence of any credible investigation and conviction for electoral offenses has led to a country where there are no deterrences for bad behavior. As a matter of fact, that gap is the reason that people repeat the behaviors that infringe fraudulently on our electoral system and democracy. Granting INEC its own prosecutorial unit or guaranteed access to dedicated prosecutors would ensure timely action against electoral violation. My two next set of points are on technological and procedural improvements. Number one under this category is mandatory electronic transmission of results. Here, I argue that codifying the use of technology for results transmission in order to make it entirely explicit would reduce the opportunities for the manipulations, massive manipulations that we saw in the 2023 elections. These manipulations happened during the collation process. Should we codify the use of technology for results transmission, it would be very clear when it has been infringed upon. The current legal ambiguity around transmission of results will create many more controversies if not immediately fixed. Number two under that category of technological and procedural improvements is expanded time frames for electoral activities. INEC often struggles with compressed timelines. Extending periods for voter registration, candidate nomination, and election preparation would improve quality and accessibility. Number three, under this category, we do need to strengthen the result collation procedures. The results collation procedures, clearer guidelines and oversight mechanisms for collation at ward, local government, and state levels would reduce disputes and manipulation opportunities. These may seem like very normal points, but I have to tell you that a certain friend of mine, a globally respected economist, Professor Joe Stiglitz, won his Nobel Prize for the simplest observation of what clarity of information does to ensure effectiveness and efficiency of outcomes. Our democracy is distorted simply because there is what we call asymmetry of information. Every time you have such, there will definitely be distortions. The number three of the broad outlines of things: structural and governance reforms. Structural and governance reforms. Under this one, I say transparent appointment processes. So I canvass for the reform of the process for appointing INEC commissioners. I think most of them that are sitting there now are members of the ruling party. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. Recommends the processes for appointing commissioners to any form of public involvement. And so, how do you expect people who are partisan to be part of an independent electoral body? That's an oxymoron. So, we must reform the process for appointing INEC commissioners and the chair to ensure merit-based selection with input from civil society, reducing partisan influence. We need to stagger their terms in order to prevent wholesale replacement by one administration. Number two, under this category, I canvass for staff professionalization, that we need to create a career structure within INEC with proper training requirements and job security for permanent staff, reducing reliance on ad hoc workers during the elections. Number three, under this, I say we need to enhance stakeholder engagement. We need to mandate regular consultations with political parties, civil society, and citizen observers with formal mechanisms for incorporating feedback. And I think that I have just two more categories to go, and I would hand the mic to you, moderator. The fourth category: legal and enforcement mechanisms. Legal and enforcement mechanisms. Number one, under this category, I call for expedited electoral dispute resolution. Pre-election disputes often are not resolved before elections occur. Creating fast-track mechanisms for electoral cases would prevent disenfranchisement. It is because of this particular problem that we have all kinds of people who were never candidates of their party in democracy properly so-called, just written in, and between the corrupted influence of our politicians, citizens got people that they had not at all intended would be their leaders. Number two, under this, stronger penalties for electoral offenses. Current penalties are often too weak to deter violations. Increasing fines and jail terms for vote buying, result falsification, and violence would strengthen deterrence. Number three, clear authority over security agencies. They've become one of the greatest problems of our democracy. INEC should have explicit legal authority to direct security agencies assigned to them during election, ensuring that they respond to electoral needs rather than political pressures. And my final set of points are where I talk about that a strong case for a twin judicial set of reforms to complete and consolidate the strengthening of INEC. The judiciary's involvement in electoral matters has become deeply troubling. and undermines democratic consolidation. Therefore, the completeness of rebuilding electoral integrity must not stop with INEC reforms. It should extend to addressing key issues and instituting relevant judicial reforms. Nigerians are aghast at the courtroom democracy. Courtroom democracy. That's what we practically now have. Go to court, because they know exactly where the court would go. So, Nigerians are aghast at the courtroom democracy phenomenon, whereby elections are increasingly decided in courts rather than the polling stations, delegitimizing the power of citizens to determine their leaders. Since 1999, numerous governors, senators, and even presidential candidates have had their mandates nullified or confirmed through lengthy litigations, sometimes years after taking office. This creates a perception that judicial decisions, not voters, determine electoral outcomes. Inconsistent and contradictory rulings. Different courts often issue conflicting judgments on similar electoral issues. Lower courts sometimes contradict higher courts, and even the Supreme Court decisions have been criticized for internal inconsistencies. This erodes public confidence in both elections and the judiciary. The real problem is not judicial involvement per se. It is that courts have become the primary arena for contesting elections. Because, number one, INEC's credibility is sometimes, in fact, is in these days very questionable, forcing aggrieved parties to go to court. Politicians lack faith in INEC's dispute resolution. The judiciary itself has become politicized and inconsistent, and that really breaks my heart. Because once upon a time in this country, if you could not trust any institution, you could fairly trust our judiciary. Am I correct? Yes.